Okay, hi everybody. It's really warm and dark in here, so I'm going to take you outside. Like music, and I thought your talk was lovely, like music, nature connects us all, and nature is a great unifier and a great way of communing, if not communicating with other people. So I'm here as a landscape architect, and I'm talking about how landscape design benefits everyone of any age, any stage, any ability, and that through all our lives, we benefit greatly by being with nature, and we connect to nature, but nature also connects us all. So most social life, most community life in villages and in towns happens not inside buildings, but in the places in between the buildings. And so, unfortunately, in Scotland, outdoor design is not something that is greatly invested in a lot of the time, but I would like to show you some projects where it has been and talk a little bit about what a difference that has made. So these are all projects that my company ERTS has done, and I've done them, some of them with people in this room. So it's lovely to see some people here who've been part of the projects I'm going to talk about. And we have a pretty strong philosophy of ERTS, which is about conviviality. And I think it echoes very nicely the threads through today. So convivial is a word, convivial comes from the Latin, and it means shared breath or shared life. And it is a word that suggests generosity, it suggests kindness, it suggests bringing people together, sharing stories, sharing life. So it's a really important part of what we do. What I'd also say is that most landscapes are fundamentally convivial if they're green, but they also need really good design to make them inclusive, to make them generous. And I think the other thing about landscape, though, is that it is naturally multisensory. So you don't need to build a multisensory landscape. That is an oxymoron. Any good green space is naturally multisensory, so it meets a whole number of other targets. So I'm going to take you through a little life cycle of projects. Oh yeah, I can see that. From birth all the way through life, and just talk really, really quickly, a little romp through lots of nice places to talk about how landscape can serve us well through our lives. So this is the renewed pond at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley. It was a derelict and abandoned and completely inaccessible site. And we had money to restore it ecologically and bring it back to ecological health. But what we were able to do in parallel with that was create a walking route around the pond. And we were able to create spaces that served the maternity unit. Now, I went with a friend who was having a baby a few years ago to York Hill to the Queen Mother's, and she had to walk round and round the car park while she was in labour. Women in labour need to walk, and it's much better to walk around a beautiful pond by the maternity unit than it is to walk around a car park in York Hill. So simple things like that make a huge, huge difference right from the very beginning. I'm sure a baby that is born to a nice, calm mother that has walked around a beautiful pond is going to have a better entrance into their life than a baby that's been sort of brought out dodging cars in a car park. My youngest was nearly born in the car, so and that probably accounts quite a lot about her. Cardio as well here, we're right outside the cardio department. It's being used for cardio and physiotherapy. The children's ward can come down here and play, and it's a safe haven for staff and for green exercise and for getting people outside during lunch hours and breaks. It's right by the staff hub. We design inclusive nurseries for babies. Babies learn through all 5 senses. These gardens are multi-sensory environments where you learn through safe and challenging play. And it's all about very basic things. So water is absolutely fundamental to learning. We're 70% water. This kid, I think, is about 100% water at the moment. And we benefit massively from engaging with water. Much easier to do that outdoors. Soil and mud are really fundamental to our existence. And we have all kinds of evidence now that mud, access to mud as a child boosts your immunity through life, but we also know that as adults, if we're engaged with gardening and we handle soil, it improves our mood. So we don't quite know how, but we know statistically that these things happen. And building access to soil, to earth, actually is really, really important in terms of our mental and physical well-being, particularly in childhood. Now, this is quite a different, this is a nursery at Edinburgh University. It's a private one. It's got a lot of money put into it. I'm not anyway a believer in sending children out to play in old tyres and pallets. I think children deserve beauty. I think we should be investing. This garden has plants, it has water, it has no pallets, no tyres. What it does have is a lot of boxes. Boxes are the best toys in the world. And it also was a very early example of free play. So at this nursery, when you go in through the front door, there is a window that goes right through the whole building and shows you the garden, which is a big long garden beyond the building. And it's a beautiful, beautiful award-winning building. But the children come in through the building and they go straight down the corridor to the window and straight out to the garden. They're not at all interested in the beautiful building. Free play is the notion of children being able to choose whether they're indoors or outdoors or what they're doing. And it means that there are doors that children can open themselves. And you will find in most free play establishments that the children are outside most of the time. This is a school in Edinburgh. We had to really, really fight to keep these cherry trees. They were not really in the way of the building, but they were in the way of the build. So the contractor wanted to put their site huts on top of these trees and take them down. They're 60 years old, so they haven't got a lot of life left in them, maybe another 20 years. But we rescued them, and look what they add. They add unbelievable sensory quality. They add seasonality, and seasonality enables children to learn about time. It enables children to learn about weather. It adds joy. It adds a sheltering canopy from the sky. It adds colour. It adds petals. You know, it was free. They were already there, and they were going to get cut down. Here in Glasgow at Merrily School, and we talked a lot about inclusive design earlier, here the children, the eco committee from the school were a very big part of the design. They were acting as designers and also as the client for this project, which is nearly 15 years old now. The children at Merrily play in a woodland every lunchtime now in the middle of Glasgow. This school is recognised as being really good as well for children on the autistic spectrum. The space outside offers calm and sanctuary and is used for de-escalation. It's also used for outdoor therapy, and it's used for forest school. So it's not just a play space, it has huge educational benefits. And conviviality isn't just about being with each other, it is about sharing our lives with everything else on the planet. It's about instilling a sense of stewardship towards the natural world and living on this planet with plants and with animals in a sort of harmonious way. So that starts very much in childhood. At East Park in Mary Hill, which is a school for young people with additional support needs that goes right up to age 18, we brought a lot of very disused and underused spaces back to life. And so this courtyard, which was pretty much abandoned, is now a central green heart for new and old classrooms, and all the classrooms open onto this space. And it's very, very safe and protected. There's a lot of runners at East Park. They like to jump over the fence and run away, and the fences are huge and it can feel really hostile. I think it can feel quite a lot like a prison. So building the buildings in front of the fences and actually, you know, creating a really lovely space that entices you to be in it rather than to run away, I think that's quite a fundamental change at the school. And it's about how community can shape behaviour. Springburn, Elmvale Primary School in Springburn has no such luck. It doesn't have any usable outdoor space at all. I've never seen such a bad playground. So here we worked with the children in workshops to create a playful trail between the school and Springburn Park. So it's a tiny little project, but it enables the children to be part of the community, to own a route to the park, to get to the park safely. And it's a very well planned route to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, but it's not ideal. It's a quick fit solution to a really difficult problem, actually. We have an epidemic of anxiety in our teenage population. I have teenagers myself, and I see it firsthand. Getting outdoors is a key solution for anxiety for people of all ages. But teenagers in particular are a very underserved group, and we get very angry with teenagers for hanging out on street corners, but teenagers don't have anywhere else to hang out. So creating really good spaces in the city that have lots of seating, that have places to kick a ball without getting told off, to go and drink a beer with your friends illicitly. You know, these things are very important parts of growing up, so we need to build that into our cities as well. And then we have places that are different again. So other types of outdoor spaces. The Hansel community in Ayrshire has a walled garden, which has been repurposed as a horticultural training centre. So it was a private estate. The walled garden is a sort of 1930s arts and crafts garden. It's very lovely. It now offers supported employment and training and horticultural therapy, and it is basically a kind of green college for learning in. I don't know what's happened to that slide, that's a bit old. And then this is different again. This is landscape, really, it's healthcare, but at the Lockhart campus in Ayrshire, we've got outdoor spaces that are very highly therapeutic and are there for rebound therapy, for trampolining outdoors instead of indoors, and it's much more fun outside. And these are spaces for physiotherapy and for other kinds of therapeutic activity rather than play. But doing that outside as well is much nicer than doing it inside. And incorporating good space day to day into housing, and this was talked about a lot this morning. Lindsay was talking about this. Having layers of space in your housing layouts is really important. So you have private space and then slightly more public space and then public spaces. It entices people outside. It makes them feel comfortable to use the outdoor spaces, and it joins all the housing up into a community. And having things like play, seating, even a post box are invitations to go outside, and people need to be invited to feel comfortable into the space. So all of that is about good design, and it's about joining communities up for everybody who lives there and making sure everybody feels like part of it. Play can also be art, and art is a wonderful thing to bring into our everyday lives. And this is a historic walled garden for the National Trust at Brodie Castle, where you can ride on a unicorn sculpture, and these sculptures light up and they have mist that comes, so you can literally ride on a rainbow unicorn through the mist. I think that things like that are important, you know, in our lives, little indulgences outside as well as indoors. Your sensory rooms look really, really wonderful, but we can do lighting and we can do mist, and we actually do quite a lot of things outdoors that you can't do indoors. So it's a great complement to sensory rooms. Sometimes you haven't got any space at all. This is Postle Health Centre, where we had a wall to work with, but there's a whole integrated workout routine all the way along this wall in the middle of Postle, and it's right by the health centre, and it gets used for green prescribing and people going outdoors to get exercise. They don't have to join a gym. You can do everything from beep tests to sit-ups to benches, all the way along the wall, right by the doctor's surgery. So a little bit about what you were talking about earlier, but having things really close by and really handy so that everybody can get to them. And family places are really important, where different ages can gather. This is an oldie, this is the Hidden Gardens, which we did a really, really long time ago. I've spent many hours with my kids and my parents there, you know, and it's one of our projects. We normally avoid them like the plague after we've built them, but not this one. It's intergenerational, it is play, gathering, and it's comfort and adventure, and it's art and music, and bringing all those things together right in the heart of where we live. And again, at Loch Gilthead on the front green, placing accessible play right at the heart of the main civic space in the middle of the town, not as a peripheral thing down a back street. It's right next to the beach. You can go on these swings, you can swing really high, and you can see all the way down Loch Gilt, and it is not just children on those swings, because it's a wonderful sensory experience to go and swing there. And at the David Livingstone Centre, we built a lot of very easily accessible wheelchair and pram accessible trails through the woods, through the ancient woodlands there. And they were also built as a supported employment and training programme by the South Ayrshire Council Modern Apprenticeship Scheme. So you're hitting lots and lots of buttons, and they were supported by volunteers and by the community payback. So building trails and things, we've lost the funding for this at the moment. and we really need to get it back. It hits so many different buttons in so many different ways. At the Borough, we had a fight to get the play right by the cafe, so you could combine coffee, sandwiches, sandcastles, and that's really important too. So not just getting houses in the right place, but getting play in the right place, getting community facilities in the right place, and this is about urban planning. The architect didn't want the playground anywhere near the building. They thought it would upset the facade. So when we finally got permission to build the playground by the building, we had to build it so that nothing was more than 800 mil high, which is about that high, which is great if you're a toddler, but it's a real challenge as a design. So it's a very, very low flat playground. And the idea here is that it's full of little animals that have escaped from the museum. And they come out and sort of entice you back in. So it's an advert for the museum, trying to get people to come in and look at what's inside in the collection. Community design, Lock Gilt Headfront Green again. This is now used for bonfire night, Christmas, scouts, car boot sales, country dancing, I mean, everything. And it wasn't usable at all before. So putting a little space in the right place enlivens the community, brings everybody together, and it's that thing again about community conviviality. And conviviality can take many shapes. I have nearly finished. So at Greyfriars Gardens, which isn't here anymore, but it used to be around the corner, this brings the benefits of nature right into the middle of the city, and we did this using our growing space kit, which has been rolled out 12 different sites so far across Glasgow and the Central Belt, and it's made out of recycled wood, and it's built by Glasgow Wood Recycling, and it's all about circular economy. But we've also reinvented our growing space during COVID, and we reinvented it as Grow Garden, which is get rest and respite outside gardens for the NHS. So the kit has become a sanctuary space for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and if you're ever at the QE, it's a really quite hostile and not very nice environment, and you can now escape into the Grow Garden, and it's a place for sanctuary, calm. They have yoga classes in there, there's a big mural, and it's a place for sharing breath, you know, it's a in the middle of all that chaos, and it's very, very well used. And more simply at Levendale Hospital, this is all about an accessible meadowline path, and this path cuts right through the campus, which was a very confusing campus, and it creates natural, clear wayfinding through the middle of a very stressful place, and it's a stressful place which very stressed people come to. So creating this very clear path and then using the wildflowers and the planting to create a calm environment along that path. These are simple and easily done and cheap things to do that make an enormous difference to how people experience their lives and how they experience healthcare. Similarly, dementia gardens with loop paths and raised beds and washing lines so that people can wash their knickers and carry on doing normal human activities into their older ages. And then the hospice, which is is our pride and joy, the hospice. This was a labour of love for us. But it's so much more than end-of-life care. The seasonal gardens ensure that there's activity all year round. Anybody can go in and use it, and I would strongly advise you to do so. The cafe is wonderful there too. But more fundamentally, for those people that are there at the end of their lives, there's something happening in the garden all year round, and all the beds on the ground floor can wheel straight out into little private gardens, and then they can wheel straight out into the bigger gardens, and people can visit straight into the bedrooms by walking into the gardens. These things are radical, but they shouldn't be, you know. This is the hospice again. And having the water reel running down the path, that thing about water again and the sensory experience of that. We've even done crematoria, and again, I think very stressful environments, and if you can make them calm and make them easy to use, you change that experience for a lot of people. And finally, landscape as memorial. Landscapes have always been used for memorial. This is the lookout at the hospice. Halo Gardens was a memorial project during COVID, which was about getting people safely outside, and these benches are 2 meters across so that you could sit during COVID and still have a meeting, still see people. And we built about 5 or 6 of these for the National Health Service and 1 or 2 others, but we're still building them because the premise for doing that hasn't really changed. They're really convivial little spaces that encourage community, so they're still very much what we're trying to achieve. And finally, something about rebirth and looking ahead and climate change. We have to ensure that we have a future. Loch Gilphead would have been underwater in 50 years if we hadn't rescued the front green and raised it up and put in water attenuation. Designing for the future and designing with climate. If we design places really well, they will last, they will be used, they will be inclusive, useful, convivial. And as Lindsay said, good design applies to anyone. You know, if you design something really well, it will work for everybody. It's not about designing for one group or another. I also would like to add that Kaylee's presentation was wonderful, but I was really intrigued that your first slide showed loads and loads of gardens as places that you loved and found inspiring, and then you were forced to work in a little windowless box. So I think you should do gardens. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hi everyone. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about enabling environments. That's really close to my heart and a big part of what we do at Anderson Christie Architects, where I'm from. I'm going to be talking about co-production, which is what we've been doing with Capability Scotland on our project at Bertha Park. And it's actually a project we're working with Felicity and Rhiannon from Arts here just talked just there. And I think what I'd like to share with you today is just how important it is to keep listening and engaging with people with lived experience, because at the heart of it, that's what's going to make the design, you know, worthwhile, purpose-built, and really successful. And I think what Lindsay and Grace have shared with us today has been, you know, part of what I'm going to be talking about today as well. Flicker. So I'm from Anderson Christie, as I mentioned. We're an architect's office in Glasgow. We're employee owned and celebrated 5 years this year. And really our ethos is about fostering relationships with people, to empower them to be part of design process. And I think really about that collaboration and co-production, that's obviously really important and part of learning and listening to each other and really making sure that you're including and empowering the end users to make decisions and really evolve the designs throughout the process. So we started in 1991 as a practice, and we're rooted in social housing. We've worked across Scotland, supporting a range of communities and people with huge different needs. We work closely with Scottish Government on housing for varying needs, do a lot on accessibility, and truly believe that if you're designing, you know, for accessibility, you're designing for everyone. We've also worked with the Ganachie Trust, looking at lifetime neighbourhoods and that idea that, you know, ageing in place is important. And again, accessibility, what you need now will be very different to what you need in the future. So how do you design for that? How do you adapt your living environments, and how do you future-proof those spaces and places that you're creating? We also work in healthcare, education, and with communities, and working with communities is really at the heart of everything that we do. And it's really about ensuring that, you know, all the spaces are adaptable, and as soon as you empower those communities to be part of the process, it also leads to the success of those projects. We do a lot of research into net zero carbon, healthy homes, indoor environments, retrofit, and inclusive design. But I think really through all our projects, it's really about listening and collaborating with people. And, you know, that means that our research continually evolves throughout the work that we do. So our inclusive community project bit of a mouthful. That's the project we're doing with Capability Scotland in Perth. It's a community hub and 60-bed care home with transitional houses and a lot of shared green outdoor spaces, and really at the heart of it all is the ethos and the sort of aspirations from Capability Scotland. So Capability Scotland are a Scottish charity which deliver exemplar care, support and education for children and adults with disabilities across Scotland. And their vision is for everyone to have a full equality of opportunity and participation as a citizen in Scotland. That's quite the aspiration, and you can imagine, you know, quite a privilege to be part of this project, which will be, you know, a one-off for them. It's not something that they'll be doing very often, so quite aspirational. So these are some of the people that we're designing for. So we've got 60 residents, 600 staff, 40 day visitors, and obviously friends and family who also come and visit them and are part of their lives. And really, I think the importance of all the work that we've been doing with them is breaking down those stereotypes, or making sure that we're not leading any decisions or ideas with preconceptions. At the end of the day, we don't have or share that lived experience. And, you know, that's really what this process is about. So they've lived at Upper Springland for over 40 years. And at the time when it was built, it was exemplar. But sadly, the site's no longer fit for purpose. Wheelchairs are much bigger. The equipment that they need takes up more space. But at the heart of it, it's been a hugely successful care home. The life, the joy, the community is, you know, something that you experience as soon as you go there. And it's really meant that the quality of life of what they have and all that experience of the staff is pretty exemplar. So moving to Bertha Park, which is not far, it's in the north of Perth, gives them the opportunity to, I guess, reevaluate their service model, look at what could be improved in terms of a holistic approach to health and wellbeing, not just for the residents, but also for the staff that work there. As I mentioned, there's a huge number of people that are supporting all the residents and day visitors. Moving also to a new community in Bertha Park gives them the opportunity to really explore what inclusive community means. How do you integrate with a wider community? Because at the moment, their existing site is really a walled garden, if you like, very closed off and isolated, and maybe limits those opportunities for friendships and networks. So this idea of moving to a new community for better inclusion was also really important. So designing co-production, as I mentioned, they've been on site for 40 years in Upper Springlands. There's a huge amount of data. So we started with that data just to understand what complex needs we were looking at. And that can mean many things, whether that's physical, emotional, learning difficulties. It covers a range of topics. And what Capability Scotland are really keen to look at is the potential for a universal design. And I think ultimately what that means is designing something that's adaptable and flexible, because you'll never be able to design one thing that meets everyone's needs. So really at the heart of it was learning from the customers or the residents, because at the end of the day, it is their home. It's not an institutional building, it's very much people's homes. And what we learned from them and from the work that Queen Margaret University did was health and wellbeing is also about those relationships and those day-to-day interactions with each other. So the needs and the service really understanding how people's day-to-day looked for staff and customers helped us understand what those activities were. And it meant that we weren't just approaching this with meeting technical standards. It was about making sure that what we were designing met their requirements. And the dedicated staff, we learned a huge amount from them. They know the customers better than anyone else. They're with them day to day. and, you know, care a lot about them as well. So there was a huge amount that we learned from them. And again, the friendships between the customers as well as the staff and the people that came to visit them, that was another layer of activities that really enhanced their health and well-being. So we drew a roadmap to what collaboration was going to look like in terms of all the different participants and experts that were going to help deliver the brief, but it always came back to talking to the customers and the staff. So what did we learn? I think something that we learned very early on was about communication with people with difficulties, with learning difficulties, behavioural difficulties. There is a potential that you lead answers and they don't come from them. So we've heavily lent on Naomi, who's a superstar. She's the co-production coordinator from Capability Scotland, and she really helped sort of bridge that communication and made sure that what we were asking them was at the sufficient sort of level of complexity, was broken down and really allowed the customers in particular to be able to make their own statements. So we used maths and Makaton, so these are ways of using symbols and images. Used tech, the Stephen in the middle, who's got quite a jazzy iPad, allows him to talk by pressing images in a certain order. So there's lots of different tech as well that we used. But we also spent a lot of time on site. So just observing what a day in the life meant for customers and staff was a huge part of just initially appreciating what happened. And mealtimes was the biggest event for everyone's day. It was the most chaotic, a lot to get organised, but I think for a lot of people it was also a highlight. It was a time to come together, and it was something that happened in a structured way and gave their life structure. And daycare, where there's an art room and other sort of recreational activities, gave them a destination and purpose. So Nicole, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the people that we met, and Nicole's one of the first people I met, who said, "I can't believe women can be architects," was how she approached me. So she was fascinated by that. I'm quite proud to get to know her a little bit better. And so she's quite a vulnerable individual. And through her time at Upper Springland, she's learned to become more and more independent, learned how to look after herself, more self-care, what to eat, how to cook for herself. And there is an aspiration that maybe one day she will live more independently out with Springland. Met Drew, he's a huge football fan, had a massive train kit in his room. And I think, you know, that's the other thing from spending a lot of time there. Every room had been personalised by each individual. They all had a range of interests, but also asking Drew to take us round the estate and tell stories of what had happened was another way of him talking rather than us asking questions. And what was interesting with spending time with people in the wheelchairs was seeing how they moved around and how all their wheelchairs were quite different, how they were all adjusted to suit their driving techniques, to avoid all the crashes, because a huge number of them are physically disabled. So this is an example of, you know, some of the size of the wheelchairs that we've got to accommodate in our sort of space standards. Jason was one of the daycare visitors, and as he took us round, something that was immediately apparent was the sensitivity he had to noise, and a lot of the spaces were open plan, and that was something, you know, he could easily become distracted or uncomfortable when people were making loud noises, or it got very difficult for him to sort of talk. So the idea of having retreats was really immediately evident from spending time with him. Joseph, his main thing was access to the outdoors. His room looks quite institutional, but it's what fits his needs. It's his retreat. He's one of the youngest people in the care home and enjoys a lot of TV, doesn't get to see his parents very often, so how he spoke to his parents, how he contacted them, how he communicated was also really important. But you can see how all the rooms are adapted quite significantly. And Natalie, she made use of the gym. She was always in the gym when I was there, and they've got hydro pools, they've got all these other facilities for recreational use, as well as art room and gym, and gardening. But she's someone who's likely to move into transitional flat. She didn't see the need for her to stay in that care home, and that sort of building up independence and personal growth was really important. So we had to tailor a lot of workshops. This was sort of a design statement workshop. We did Architecture and Design Scotland, and we used postcards to kind of capture ideas of what the experience could be like, from arriving at the community hub to going to being greeted by someone, and what the access outdoors would be like. And Capability Scotland spent quite a bit on doing a one-to-one mock-up of studio rooms. As I mentioned, we'll be building at least 60 of these on the site. And it meant that we could immediately test those space standards that we developed and really bring life what we were drawing to the customers and staff to test out different layouts and experience that themselves so that they could give us feedback. And you can see some of the people making use of that here and using the Makaton cards. We also gave us an opportunity to test how we could use assistive technologies. And that's really like using kinetic pads for switches, and you can really place them anywhere. And that allows greatest flexibility. And you can kit out the room with sensors as well. And that helps with the assistive care that they need as well. Looking at the equipment that they use, and even just watching the staff and taking part in how you transfer someone from a bed to a trolley to understand the sort of space standards that you need, not just in the bedrooms but throughout the building. And we did some great design competitions with MOBI, which included George Clark, and that was with the neighbouring school as well as Capability Scotland's college. And the models were just amazing. I think children have the best imagination, and this really came through with what we saw. The college even built little robots. They came up with an idea of how robots could deliver their post or meals, and just some lovely ideas. And some of the school children really took on to landscaping and sort of sensory experience of what the outdoor spaces could be like in the community spaces. So all of this really fed into the brief. And to start with, we had to kind of drill into, well, what are our core aims here for the project? As I mentioned, it's about enabling design principles. How do you ensure that the studios and the communal spaces around them really are about enhancing sort of personal growth? Access to all is really about how people move around, ensuring there's no barriers. And really that's how it works at the moment. Upper Springland, you can visit anyone across the whole estate. Health and wellbeing, access to the outdoors, how people interact and socialise. Personal growth, as I mentioned, sort of, being able to do your own laundry, things that we take for granted. Cooking, and as again, just having your own personal outdoor space and supporting people. And that comes back to the staff, who are really critical to it all. So the other thing that we did with some of the staff and service managers was actually take them around other projects and do a lot of design workshops to drill into what it was we were designing and what was the brief, what were the aspirations. And that is going to continually shape and evolve as we keep developing the project. And this is a snippet of the brief. So it's actually like a 200-page document, and that really collated all the information that we had from co-production, but tried to distill it in sort of initial sketches and ideas of what those spaces and rooms were going to be like. So the stories have shaped our initial ideas and concept, and it is really a shared vision. So this is one of the initial sort of master plan sketches that we've done with the community hub and staff hub at the top. And as I mentioned, this has things like art room, gardening spaces, hydro pool, gym. And it was one of the first stories I was really touched by was one of the guys who used to say, I'm going to daycare, but he'd talk about it like it was his job. And then when he was getting too old, he was like, I'm retiring now, so I won't be going up as much. And it just gave them purpose, you know, the idea of having a destination nearby that they knew there wasn't any sort of pre-considerations like you talked about, Grace, in terms of accessibility. It was just another place that they could go to, that they were welcome, and there was, you know, a huge amount that they could do and gave their life meaning. Really touched me. And then the studios with shared courtyards, and also we put in like a mini sort of community hub there where the 3 services from all those houses can actually come together and do other social events, and surrounded by green space. So the work that Arts is doing with us. And then, yeah, just how these activities can happen. I think another thing that we're looking at is about independence is that even the opportunity to have your front door. So it really is about breaking down those barriers and I guess ideas about what a care home is. You know, how do you make it more about independent living and giving everyone their own piece of outdoor green space. And then these are some initial sort of concept renders of what some of these key rooms look like. So the home, you know, what do these studios, how could they feel? Something a bit more soft. The idea of having your own front door, a bit more generous in space so they can have people around. And the idea that it is a studio, it's not just a bedroom, it's somewhere where they will spend time and will socialise as well. And looking at some of the shared spaces like the dining room. And something that we always used to sort of start to draw was, oh, everyone wants to sit together and eat, but that's not the case. Everyone wants privacy. It's not something that they always do in a social situation. So something that's actually a bit more broken up, that gives them a little bit of privacy, but still all be in the same space was quite important. And the idea of views through so that staff had the best oversight of how people were doing without necessarily having to handhold. Again, this idea of learned dependency, breaking down those opportunities of learned dependency. And this idea of a destination. So whilst the community hub is at the first and foremost about providing daycare services, Capability Scotland are also looking at this being a resource for people who don't use those facilities to come in and get help and support. And this idea of what some of these courtyards could be, giving choice and opportunities for well-being. So that's a bit of a run through where we're at the moment with the project. But as I said, it's been a huge group effort, and it's all down to listening and learning from each other. And it will continue to evolve in that way. And it's something that we're really excited to see.